I was wiping down tables for the last time. 31 years of memories soaked into every scratch and stain. Tomorrow, the bank would take the keys to Murphy's Diner, and I joined the long list of small business owners who couldn't compete with the world anymore. Then, a stranger walked in 5 minutes before closing, looking like he hadn't eaten in days. I gave him a free meal. He left me a lottery ticket as a tip. I thought it was worthless. I was wrong about everything. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments what's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you. And if stories about unexpected miracles and the power of kindness speak to you, follow this page so you don't miss the next one. Murphy's Diner had been my life for 30 years. I'd bought it from old Murphy himself back in 1994, a young man with big dreams and a small savings account. The red vinyl booths were already cracked then. The grill had seen better decades, and the neon sign flickered like it was sending Morse code to the universe. But it was mine. For 3 decades, I'd served coffee to construction workers starting their shifts at 5 a.m., made grilled cheese for kids whose mothers worked double shifts, and listened to the stories of anyone who needed an ear. The diner had been a second home to half the neighborhood, a place where everyone knew your name and your usual order. But times change. The big chain restaurants moved in with their flashy signs and marketing budgets. Food delivery apps made it easier to eat at home. The pandemic had been the final blow. Months of reduced capacity, supply chain issues, and customers who never quite came back in the same numbers. Now, on this cold Tuesday night in March, I was closing Murphy's Diner forever. The for sale sign had been in the window for 6 months. The bank had been patient, but patience has limits when you're 3 months behind on the mortgage. Tomorrow morning, I'd hand over the keys and walk away from the only life I'd ever known. I'd sent my last waitress, Betty, home early. No point in paying her to watch me feel sorry for myself. The dinner rush had been more like a dinner trickle. Maybe 8 customers all day. I'd spent the evening cleaning equipment that wouldn't be mine much longer, boxing up personal items and trying not to think about what came next. At 9:55 p.m., 5 minutes before my posted closing time, I was about to flip the sign to closed when I saw him through the window. A man in his 60s, maybe 70s, wearing a coat that had seen better years and shoes that had walked too many miles. He stood outside for a moment reading the menu taped to the glass, then pushed open the door. "We're about to close," I said, but not unkindly. "Kitchen's still warm if you need something quick." He looked around the empty diner, taking in the worn booths and the faded photographs of the neighborhood from decades past. "Just coffee and maybe a piece of pie if you have it. I've got apple pie, made it this morning. I didn't mention it might be the last pie I'd ever make in this kitchen." He slid into a booth near the window, the same one where Mrs. Watson used to sit every Sunday after church, where Tommy Cooper had proposed to his girlfriend last Valentine's Day, where 1,000 small moments had played out over the years. I poured him coffee in one of the heavy white mugs I'd been using since the Clinton administration and cut him a generous slice of pie. Up close, I could see he was tired in the way that goes deeper than just needing sleep. His clothes were clean but worn, his hands weathered, his eyes kind but carrying weight. "How much do I owe you?" he asked, reaching for a wallet that looked as thin as paper. "On the house," I said. "It's been a slow night." He looked up at me, surprised. "That's very kind, but I can pay." "I'm sure you can. But sometimes kindness is just kindness. No strings attached." The stranger, Frank, he told me when I asked, ate his pie slowly, like he was savoring every bite. We talked while I finished my closing routine, wiping down the counter, refilling salt shakers, doing the small tasks that had become as natural as breathing. "How long have you had this place?" he asked. 30 years next month." "Well, would have been." I gestured around the empty diner. "This is actually the last night. Bank's taking it back tomorrow." Frank paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "I'm sorry to hear that. It seems like a good place. Feels like it has stories. More stories than I could tell in a lifetime." I sat down across from him, something I rarely did with customers. But the night felt different, final. Every booth, every table, they've all seen proposals, breakups, first dates, last meals, birthday celebrations, funeral planning sessions. This place has been a lot of things to a lot of people. What will you do now? I shrugged. Find a job somewhere, I guess. I'm 62, so it won't be easy. But I've been cooking since I was 16. Someone will need a short-order cook. Frank nodded thoughtfully. You know, I've eaten in a lot of places over the years. Fancy restaurants, chain places, diners like this. The food's important, but it's not everything. The way you treated me when I walked in, that's rarer than you might think. How do you mean? You could have turned me away. 5 minutes to closing. Stranger walks in looking like he's down on his luck. Instead, you welcomed me in, gave me a free meal, sat down to talk. That says something about who you are. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. That's just common decency. No, Frank said firmly. Common decency would have been serving me and taking my money. What you did was kindness. There's a difference. We talked for another hour. Frank told me he'd been traveling, seeing the country, meeting people. He'd worked in business for most of his life but was retired now. He didn't say much about family, but I got the sense he was alone in the world, like a lot of older folks. When he finally stood to leave, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled lottery ticket. I know you said the meal was on the house, but I'd like to leave you something. A tip. He placed the ticket on the table. I buy one every week. Never won more than $5, but who knows? Maybe tonight's your lucky night. I looked at the ticket, a scratch-off game called Lucky Sevens, and smiled. You don't have to do this. I want to. Besides, I've got a good feeling about this one. He shook my hand, his grip firm and warm. Thank you for the meal, Louis, and for the conversation. Sometimes that's worth more than money. I watched him walk out into the night, hands in his pockets, disappearing into the darkness like he'd never been there at all. I looked down at the lottery ticket in my hand. It was wrinkled like it had been in his pocket for a while, and one corner was slightly torn. I slipped it into my apron pocket and finished closing up. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and bank officials and the end of everything I'd built. But tonight I had had a good conversation with a kind stranger, and somehow that felt like enough. The next morning came too soon, and not soon enough. I'd barely slept, my mind cycling between memories of the diner's good years and anxiety about what came next. The bank appointment wasn't until 10 a.m., but I arrived at Murphy's at 6, like I had every morning for 30 years. The diner felt different in the early light, smaller somehow, more fragile. I made myself a pot of coffee and sat in Frank's booth from the night before, watching the neighborhood wake up through the window. Mrs. Baker walked her dog past the front door, the same route she'd taken every morning for a decade. The mail truck rumbled by, life going on, indifferent to my small tragedy. I'd brought boxes to pack up my personal items. The photos on the wall, the coffee mug my daughter had made me in high school pottery class, the lucky spatula that had flipped 1,000,000 eggs. As I worked, I found the lottery ticket in my apron pocket. Lucky Sevens, I read aloud to the empty diner. The ticket was still wrinkled, still torn at one corner. I'd never been much of a gambler. The diner had been risked enough for one lifetime, but curiosity got the better of me. I found a quarter in the register and started scratching off the silver coating. The first row revealed 3 cherries, no match. The second row showed 2 sevens and a star, close but not quite. I was about to toss it in the trash when I scratched off the third row. 7, 7, 7. I stared at the ticket, certain I was seeing things wrong. I scratched off the prize amount box with shaking hands. Automated system walked me through checking the ticket number, the game number, the date. Everything matched. The ticket was legitimate. Changed everything. Frank, a man I'd given a free meal to out of simple kindness, had handed me a miracle. I had to find him. I had to share this windfall. It was his ticket, his luck, his generosity that had made this possible. But I didn't know his last name, didn't have his phone number, didn't even know if Frank was his real name. I called the bank and postponed the meeting. Then I started searching. Finding one man in a city of 500,000 people armed with only a first name and a vague description turned out to be harder than I had expected. I started with the obvious places: the homeless shelter, the soup kitchen, the bus station. I described Frank to everyone who would listen: 60s or 70s, gray hair, kind eyes, worn coat, gentle manner. No one had seen him. I posted on the neighborhood Facebook group describing my mystery customer and asking if anyone knew him. I got dozens of responses, people sharing their own stories of kind strangers offering to help with the search, expressing amazement at the lottery win, but no one recognized Frank. I went to the lottery office in person, hoping they might have security footage or some way to track where the ticket had been purchased. The clerk was sympathetic, but explained that privacy laws prevented them from sharing that information. The ticket could have been bought anywhere in the state. You could just keep the money, she suggested gently. He gave you the ticket as a gift. Legally, it's yours. Legally, maybe, but not morally. I spent the next week searching. I walked the streets near the diner, visited every coffee shop and restaurant in a 10B block radius, asked mail carriers and bus drivers if they'd seen a man matching Frank's description. The diner stayed closed while I searched. I couldn't bring myself to reopen until I'd found Frank, until I could share this incredible stroke of luck with the man who'd made it possible. The closed sign felt temporary now, hopeful rather than final. Betty, my former waitress, stopped by one afternoon while I was sitting in the diner going through phone books and online directories. "Louis, honey, you're driving yourself crazy," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Maybe this Frank person doesn't want to be found. Maybe he knew exactly what he was doing when he gave you that ticket. But $50,000, Betty, that's life-changing money. I can't just keep it." "Why not? You gave him a free meal when you were about to lose everything. You showed him kindness when you had every reason to be bitter. Maybe this is the universe paying you back." I wanted to believe her, but something didn't feel right about keeping money that wasn't mine, even if it had been given freely. Frank had seemed like a man who understood the value of $1. Surely he would have checked the ticket himself if he'd thought it might be worth something, unless the answer came from an unexpected source. I was at the diner on a Thursday morning, a week and a half after Frank's visit, when a woman in her 40s knocked on the glass door. I'd left the closed sign up, but she seemed persistent, so I let her in. "Are you Louis, the owner of this diner?" "I am. Can I help you?" She looked around the empty restaurant, taking in the boxes I'd packed and unpacked, the lottery ticket I'd laminated and placed on the counter like a shrine. "I saw your post on Facebook about the man who left you a lottery ticket. You described my father." My heart jumped. "Frank, you know Frank. Frank Roberts. He died 3 days ago." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into the nearest booth and she sat across from me, her expression gentle but sad. "I'm Sally Roberts. Frank was my dad. When I saw your description, the gray hair, the worn coat, the kindness, I knew it had to be him. I'm so sorry for your loss," I managed. "He seemed like a wonderful man." He was. And what you described, giving him a free meal, sitting with him to talk, that sounds exactly like the kind of person he would have sought out. "I don't understand." Sally smiled, though her eyes were bright with tears. "My father was a wealthy man, Mr. Louis. He made his fortune in real estate. But after my mother died 5 years ago, he became different, obsessed with the idea that money should go to people who deserved it, not just people who were lucky enough to inherit it or smart enough to earn it." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of Frank. The same kind eyes, the same gentle smile, but wearing an expensive suit and standing in front of a mansion. He started what he called his kindness project. He'd dress down, go to diners and coffee shops and small businesses, and watch how people treated strangers. If someone showed genuine kindness, especially when they clearly couldn't afford to do so, he'd leave them a winning lottery ticket. I stared at the photo, trying to reconcile the wealthy man in the expensive suit with the humble stranger who'd sat in my booth. He had winning tickets just ready to give away. Sally nodded. He bought hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. He'd scratch them off at home, separate the winners from the losers, paint them all over again, and carry the winning ones with him. Me about it the last time I saw him. He said there was a diner owner who gave free meals to people who couldn't pay, who treated everyone with dignity regardless of how they looked or how much money they had. He was waiting for the right moment. I felt tears building behind my eyes. He knew the ticket was worth $50,000. Oh, yes. He checked every ticket carefully. He said this one was perfect. Not so much that it would seem suspicious, but exactly enough to solve your problem. He'd done his research. Mr. Louis. He knew about your mortgage, your struggles. He wanted to help, but he wanted to do it in a way that felt like luck, not charity. Why? Why would he do that for a stranger? Sally was quiet for a moment, looking around the diner. After my mother died, Dad became convinced that kindness was the only thing that really mattered in the world. He said he'd spent his whole life accumulating money, but the only times he'd felt truly wealthy was when he was helping other people. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook worn and filled with handwriting. He kept records, every person he helped, every act of kindness he witnessed. "You're in here, Mr. Louis." 3 different entries over the past month. She opened the notebook and read, March. Diner owner gave free coffee to homeless veteran. Didn't make a show of it, just quietly refused payment. March 15th. Same man let an elderly woman sit in booth for 3 hours during a rainstorm. Kept refilling her coffee, never asked her to leave. March 28th. Final visit. Diner owner gave me free meal on his last night in business. Genuine kindness from someone facing his own hardship. This is the one I was crying out, not caring who saw. I wish I could have thanked him. "You did thank him," Sally said gently, "by being exactly the kind of person he hoped existed in the world, by proving that kindness isn't dead, even when times are hard." She stood to leave, then paused. "There's one more thing. Dad left instructions in his will. If any of his lottery recipients ever tried to find him to share the money, I was supposed to give them this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter. "Dear friend, the money is yours freely given. No strings attached. But if you truly want to honor my memory, use some of it to keep being the kind of person who gives free meals to strangers. The world needs more people like you." Frank Roberts. I reopened Murphy's Diner 2 weeks later. The $50,000 paid off the mortgage, covered the outstanding bills, and left enough for some much-needed repairs and updates. But more importantly, it gave me something I'd lost. Hope. The story of Frank's kindness spread through the neighborhood faster than I could have imagined. Sally had given me permission to share her father's story, and soon the local newspaper picked it up, then the regional news. Within a month, Murphy's Diner was busier than it had been in years, filled with people who wanted to experience the place where a stranger's kindness had created a miracle. But the real miracle wasn't the money. It was what Frank's example inspired me to do. I started small. A free meal here and there for someone who looked like they needed it. A cup of coffee that somehow never made it onto the bill. A piece of pie on the house for a customer celebrating good news or mourning bad news. Then I got more intentional about it. I created what I called the Frank Roberts Fund, a jar by the register where customers could contribute to pay for meals for those who couldn't afford them. The response was overwhelming. Within a month, we were serving dozens of free meals every week. Betty came back to work and I hired 2 more waitresses. Business was good, but more than that, the diner felt alive again. It had become what Frank had seen in it all along. A place where kindness lived, where people took care of each other, where small acts of generosity created ripples that spread far beyond these walls. 6 months after Frank's visit, Sally came back to the diner. She'd been traveling, she said, continuing her father's work in her own way. She'd started a foundation that gave small grants to struggling small businesses. Always anonymously, always to people who'd shown kindness to others. Dad would be so proud, she said, looking around at the bustling diner. This is exactly what he hoped would happen. I think about him every day, I told her. Every time I give someone a free meal, every time I see a customer help another customer, every time someone pays it forward, he's still here in a way. He is, she agreed. Kindness doesn't die with the person who starts it. It keeps going, keeps growing, keeps changing lives. As she prepared to leave, Sally handed me another envelope. One last thing from Dad. He wrote this the night before he died. The letter was short. Louis, if the diner is still open when you read this, then my plan worked. But remember, the lottery ticket was just the beginning. The real treasure is what you do with the second chance. Keep being kind. Keep proving that good people exist. Keep Murphy's Diner a place where strangers become friends and everyone leaves a little better than they came. That's the only tip I ever really wanted to leave you. Frank Roberts. I keep that letter in my apron pocket now, right where Frank's lottery ticket used to be. And every morning when I unlock the door to Murphy's Diner, I think about a stranger who saw something worth saving in a failing restaurant and a broken-down cook. Frank Roberts taught me that luck isn't random. It's kindness recognizing kindness. It's generosity finding its way to generous hearts. It's the universe's way of making sure that good people get good things, especially when they least expect it. The lottery ticket is still laminated on the wall behind the register, but it's not the real treasure anymore. The real treasure is the line of customers every morning, the jar full of donations for free meals, the thank you notes from people whose lives were touched by a stranger's kindness. Frank was right about one thing. Sometimes the best tip you can leave isn't money. Sometimes it's hope. Sometimes it's proof that there are still good people in the world. Still reasons to believe in second chances. Still magic in the simple act of treating a stranger like family. Murphy's Diner is thriving now. But more than that, it's become what Frank always saw it could be. A place where kindness lives, where generosity grows, and where every meal served is a small act of faith and the goodness of humanity. And every week I buy a lottery ticket, not because I need the money anymore, but because I'm looking for the next Frank, the next person who needs to know that kindness still exists in the world. Because some tips are too important to keep to yourself. A beautiful story about unexpected generosity and the ripple effects of kindness. What's the most unexpected act of kindness you've ever received? Share your story in the comments below. If this story of second chances and paying it forward touched your heart, please hit like and subscribe for more silent stories that restore faith in humanity.